Hello and welcome to Insanely Creating. We are going to have a go at turning this fine gentleman here that I found on eBay for an entire £1 into a Jason Voorhees Part 7 from the Friday the 13th franchise. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, sandpaper. We have to make sure that he is scratched all over where we want the clay to stick. Otherwise, the skin would just be far too smooth and everything would just peel and flake and chip off when it is dry. This way it'll stay on a little bit better. Once that is done, we get our Fimo Air Basic. This stuff is really great. I've used this for a few projects before, but it just air dries. It's not like other Fimo where you have to put it in the oven. This is the air drying stuff, and I find it to be a little bit stronger than some other air dry clays that I've used in the past. So I'm completely covering his torso in the air dry clay, making sure that it is completely covering, because if I was to leave any gaps and just put this on a section of his body, it would just come off straight away. Even though we've sanded him, this stuff is not designed to super stick onto something. It would just flake off. And the reason that I'm moving his arm around is because we want to make sure that he's still got mobility. So I'm just touching up where the arm is pushing the clay away, and the waist as well. We've got to really make sure that he's still got full mobility. And I'm going to start with my tools and get some detail on him, because Jason has got exposed ribs and nasty skin all showing. So even though he's wearing a shirt, there's going to be holes in the shirt, so we need some cool details poking out that we get to see. So I'm just getting in there and adding some texture using all of my different tools that I have. Some of them have got some interesting textures, so I'm just throwing that on there and just kind of making it up as I go along, basically. Well, what have we got here? So I've just been doing a couple of little bits on here. There's not much to look at so far, but I've added texture all over. And next we need to tackle the arms and the legs and get some texture on those. But I'm not going to be completely covering them, so we need something stronger. And so I have bought some Apoxie Sculpt. I have never used this before, so you're about to watch me do it for the very first time, but I've heard good things. So we need to get our gloves on. Now, some people have a bit of an allergic reaction to this stuff while it is getting mixed. So if you don't want to be silly, you should be wearing your gloves, but I'm not your mum and I can't really tell you what to do. So just be a grown up with this bit, all right? Once it was mixed, it was fine for me, but double check for yourself. Now, the hand is wrong, so we are cutting it off. I've decided that I would like this hand to be more open rather than the traditional Action Man half closed. So using my little wire that I've got here, I'm going to poke some holes and make him some new fingers that we will then build up using Apoxie Sculpt. Now for this, I also whipped out my epoxy glue, which is exactly as it sounds. It's a 2-part glue that when you mix, it is solid. This stuff will stick anything to anything. It is really cool. But for this, I'm using it to really make sure that those wires don't wiggle away or come loose while I'm in the middle of getting the Apoxie Sculpt on there. I want these to be nice and strong. And next is the face sculpt. Now we need to get rid of the whole top half of his head, Hannibal the Cannibal style, because this guy's got a completely different shaped head to Jason. I've also shaved down the front of the face as well, just to really make sure it's as flat as possible. So I've got a lovely clean canvas for getting the Jason face on. So I'm using reference photos from the movie as well as the NECA figure that got released this year. And I'm kind of just doing what I want a little bit with it as well. I mean, I can. This is going to be in my flats for my husband. I can kind of do what I want with it. But I am still trying to get it to look a bit like Jason. I promise. Apologies for not filming all of the process. I forgot. I'm new to this and I forgot to turn my camera on for some of it, but this is the first layer of the face. I need to get the brow bone a little bit thicker and everything, but as you can see, we've got a nice long head and it's getting nice and solid now, ready for the next bit. I've added some teeth on the side. There we go. Body still as it was. Hand has been added. I've added texture to the arms and we've got kneecaps. We've got knees now, which is brilliant. There they are. And now we're going to go in with our very first bit of paint. I'm literally just going to cover him in a mixture of light and dark red and a tiny bit of black. And I think I might have even put a little bit of brown in there as well, but I am just going to completely cover him and start with that as a base. And now we've got him looking like Hellraiser's Uncle Frank.
It's Frank. It's Uncle Frank.
No.
You remember?
No.
Now it's time to get some new epoxy sculpt layers on there on the bits that I feel just need a little touching up, making better. So I've added extra bones to the hand and the brow bone, just added a little more detail, and I'm just adding some onto the neck now because once I painted I realised that you could really see the edges. So just going in and creating the texture just to really blend it in that a little bit more. No one will ever know. I'm going in with the white acrylic on everything that is going to be exposed bone. Obviously they're not going to be bright white and shiny in the end. I just need them to be a little bit brighter at the moment so that when I start covering them in this more skinny tone, they are just a bit of a different colour. Oh, I also added a spine. I'm sorry, I did that without telling you. I realised that he had an exposed spine on his back and I did it without recording it. Apologies. Apologies. And now we are doing a little bit of dry brushing on all the bones just to make them look aged and a little bit gross, a little bit decomposing. Dry brushing is literally just having the smallest amount of paint on your brush and brushing it on. Simple. And the complete opposite to dry brushing, now I am watering down my little black acrylic paint and just putting it all over him. I do this about 3 times. It gets all the colour into all the little crevices and just creates a really lovely dimension that I can't do by hand on my own. Just not talented enough. So this works perfectly. I think it's quite effective. Look at him. Looks all right. Now I'm completely covering him in varnish. This isn't just going to make him look nice and gooey and gross, but it's also going to seal in all that hard work that we have just done with all the acrylic. Next are the clothes. These have been very kindly donated by my husband, so I'm going to chop into them and make teeny tiny versions of them for our Jason. I'm going in there with my blade what do you call it? Stanley knife. Yes, I'm going in there with my Stanley knife to cut it all up and make it all ripped and nasty and ready for Jason to wear. Once they were made, I realised they were way too light in colour, so I'm getting my watered down acrylic and I am changing that. Once these dried, the colour did go a little bit lighter than I was hoping. This also happened to the blood that I ended up adding to the shirt as well. It went way too light, so I might have to redo those in the future just to make them look a little bit more realistic and effective. You will see that in just a moment. And as you can see, the blood stains did go slightly pinker. They look a little bit more like he's just spilt some wine down himself. So I'll have to revise what paints I'm using and see if I can fix that up at a later date. But for now, we are just going to sew him into his clothes so that the little bit of sculpting on his body are poking out. So we can see them. I'm going to add his boots that he came with and onto the mask. I'm using Worbla for this and just pressing it against his tinfoiled head to keep him safe. I'm just pressing it, trying to get it to the shape needed so that his nose pokes through and everything really makes that good mask shape. But true fashion, I managed to do almost the entire thing without filming it. But I made some eye holes using this little jewellery making tool. And I've marked off where all of the holes need to be and the chevron and the little attachments for going around his head where the little belts will be, using this little mask as a reference as well as other images. Now when I then covered him in gesso, I noticed just how rough the surface was looking, so I did end up putting the thinnest layer of Apoxie Sculpt over the top of him just to try and smooth out those areas that haven't got the holes to disguise how rough the Worbla was. As I was dotting the holes on with my Sharpie, they did make slight indents, which will make it easier for when I start the drilling later on. So, silver linings and all that. I tend to jump back and forth with what I'm making, so now we're on to the machete, which I actually carved out of a ice lolly stick and then added a Apoxie Sculpt handle. I painted it using my nail polish. As you can see, I match it perfectly. So I've got that all ready to go. I just need to paint the handle and maybe give another couple of coats onto the blade just to make it a little bit more effective. But this is the nail polish I ended up using. This was given to me by my mother-in-law. And it works perfectly. There's probably much cheaper ones you can get, but this I just happen to have hanging around, so this is what I used. And I've also had a go at doing an axe handle. As you can see, I sketched over the lollipop stick, carved it down using my Stanley knife. Just need to add the top bit there, the little blade of the axe. And I'm bulking it out using Apoxie Sculpt, but that'll look good once painted. So will all these things actually look lovely once they're all painted. Speaking of, I managed to find the most amazing red paint at the bottom of all my craft supplies. This stuff is so old, so I don't think it is meant to look like this. I could be wrong, but it's really out of date and it worked really well because it seems to have gone really thick and it just looks fantastic. So this is what I found. And like I said, it's really out of date, but it seemed to work really well. Next, using a tissue to stabilise the mask to make sure it doesn't crack in half, I'm going in there with my hand drill and just creating the holes. Now I've given the mask a couple of coats of Mr. Super Clear, which is a flat matte sealant in spray form. And I am just shaving off some colour from my chalk pastels that I'm going to now add. This takes a lot of layers, I have to admit. I used maybe 4 or 5 layers of Mr. Super Clear, and it takes a while to really get that colour in, but be persistent, don't give up, it just takes a while. I did actually get really impatient here, and I slightly dampened my brush in the eye hole just there, which I think was a bit of a mistake, but if you like it, fantastic. But I just think it ended up looking a little heavy-handed with the colour in that eye hole, but there you go, these things happen. Now it's time to go in with the watercolour pencils and a few more layers of MSC. I'm adding in some extra details. These are meant to be little bumps and scrapes that are on the mask. My husband has got a replica mask from part 7 that he really loves, and it has all of these little black markings all over it. So I'm copying them and replicating them onto the miniature version for this figure. Now, I gave my husband the option of whether he wanted the mask to have a gloss finish or a matte finish, and he ended up going with the gloss finish, so that's what I've done this time. I think if it was a gift for myself, I would have left it matte, but he wanted it glossy, so he's having it glossy. Now, just using a little bit of blue tack to hold it in place with his foil covering once more, we're going to start making the straps to hold the mask in place. And for the straps, we're going to get the Worbla back out again. We're going to heat it up using the hairdryer, making sure things don't blow away while we're heating them up, and add them around the circumference of the head as well as over the top of the head, really holding it in place. The straps aren't painted yet, but I just wanted to show that I added some felt on the inside to make sure that the paintwork on the face was protected, as well as adding these little epoxy sculpt rivets. I think these are rivets. But yes, it's nice and fuzzy on the inside of the mask. It will make sure that the paintwork doesn't get damaged every time we are taking the mask on and off. Yeah, we're going to paint the straps a nice dark brown. Get them looking good. Here they are. And then just getting that fancy nail polish back out to paint the rivets. That nice little metallic colour. And then I snuck off and made some cheeky little buttons to go on his shirt. So I'm just painting them up now. And I've added on some chain that I bought on eBay. And with that, our Jason is pretty much done. Mission accomplished, guys. I am really chuffed with this guy. He's not perfect by any means, but I think he turned out pretty good considering that he only cost a few quid to make. To make him a bit more of a 2.0, I want to see how I am able to make the clothes look wet all the time. So I'm going to do some testing on some spare bits of fabric that I've got. But if any of you guys have got any suggestions on how I could do that, make him look always wet, I'm going to test out just, you know, glopping varnish onto the fabric, but I don't want it to look gooey. Like, like slime. I don't want it to look like slime. I want it to look like he's just come out of Camp Crystal Lake. Any suggestions, please write them in the comments. Let me know what you think I could do. I'm also going to get him a smaller link chain as well. This one's too chunky. So we'll see what else I can find. But apart from that, mission accomplished. Husband loves it. If you ended up liking this, give it a little thumbs up. Really appreciate it. And if you loved it and you don't want to miss out on any future projects that I end up doing, if you don't want to miss out on them, please subscribe. All right, guys, we're going to go to the cinematic shots of this guy over in the woods.